listening to Make It, a podcast by Bonsai Creative that helps creatives in film get where they're going faster by sharing the advice, knowledge, and insights of professional creatives across the film industry. I'm your host, Chris Barkley.
Hello, my name is Brian Frankel. I'm an attorney and producer. You might know me from the Wheaton Film Festival, the Brian Frankel Law Firm, or my work with the Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts.
Brian Frankel, welcome to the Make It podcast.
Chris, thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. And because you have a background in law and because you wear a lot of different hats outside of filmmaking, I want to give this audience a deeper sense of who you are. So I'm going to read from your bio. And like I always say, this is the internet. So if anything sounds off or isn't correct, feel free to amend to what I read. Brian A. Frankel is an award-winning independent filmmaker and attorney who helps companies and creative professionals achieve their goals. Through his practice as a business, entertainment, and intellectual property attorney in Washington, D.C., he represents film and video producers, media distribution companies, screenwriters, Fortune 50 companies, technology startups, government subcontractors, online marketplaces, social media and marketing firms, professional athletic teams, consultants, freelancers, podcasters, live event producers, and talent. Mr. Frankel is active and engaged in the creative community. He currently serves as the chairman of the Education Committee for the Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts and executive director of the DC Filmmakers and DC Media Makers, the festival director for the Wheaton Film Festival, and is the past vice president of the University of Florida Law Alumni Group for DC. Mr. Frankel has produced and or directed music videos, films, television shows, commercials, and multimedia projects for clients, including MTV, Spike TV, Motorola, M Audio, Def Jam South Records, the Merchant Marines, and the Independent Feature Project. He was also honored as a Kodak Emerging Filmmaker. He is the managing member of the Brian Frankel Law Firm and counsel with Copyright Counselors, LLC. Mr. Frankel is admitted to practice in the District of Columbia, Florida, and before the DC Federal Court. He has served on the board of directors for the Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts since 2013. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland. Brian, that is quite a bio and resume. You've been busy, my friend. So let me ask you this. How did your family inform and inspire who you are today? I know you grew up in a close-knit Jewish family, right?
Yeah. So I would say, so my parents split when I was, or they divorced when I was younger. So, I guess being able to jump from one dynamic to another, going from my joint custody, going from my mom's house to my dad's place, back and forth. It was like jumping from one ecosystem to another.
How old were you?
So I must have been like seven or eight when they split up. And so if you're asking, and I didn't know this question was coming up, and it's a great question. And I haven't looked at it through this lens before, Chris. So it's interesting. But my initial reaction is, so in having to go from mom's place to dad's place, it was like jumping from a hot water to a cold water, just so different, the energy and the setting and everything. And so I would say in my professional career, like we mentioned, wearing different hats. And I think the ability to have a different reality, a different set of responsibilities, a different dynamic, I probably would say that would be something that I think my childhood prepared me for. And then another thing that not a lot of people know is I actually grew up in a hotel. So
Wow.
my dad owned a hotel on South Beach in Miami.
Okay.
And I worked in that hotel from the time I was in fourth grade. And so that definitely prepared me for being involved in business and dealing with people. And an interesting element is like my dad he would leave on vacation, and that means that my brother and I would be sitting there running the hotel for a week or something like that.
What does that mean? Give me some details on what you did at a hotel as a fourth grader.
So it was probably, he didn't leave when I was in fourth grade. Probably when I was like seventh, eighth grade was when he felt he could leave. And my brother's a few years older than me. So, but stuff, we would collect rents. We would rent rooms to people. We would, clean the rooms, do the laundry. I mean, this wasn't like some big glamorous hotel. This was like 40, 50 rooms. And there were people who'd be there for the season, and people who'd be there for a shorter term. And so it was running a business. And so now, Chris, it's like when someone talks to me about wanting to build their dreams or wanting to build a production or anything, that experience is with me. And so I would say those two things from my childhood, growing up in a hotel in Miami Beach, when Miami Vice was going around, and Miami had really undergone the big shift because of the Cuban boat lift. I mean, we saw Miami go from like being a high element prestige place to being something that was going through a lot of challenges, and then going way back up beyond where it ever was.
Right.
And so riding that out on Miami Beach, renting rooms to people is a reflection of who's going on around you and what's happening there. So I carry that experience with me.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a little bit easier for you to be an entrepreneur having that background than had you not done that. And you're right about Miami, by the way, too. Right now, there's a lot of people lobbying for it to be the next tech hub in the United States. I mean, it's already become sort of a playground for art collectors and art investors, and because of Art Basel and the things that happen there and the money that flows through there. But here comes Silicon Valley right behind it now. Here comes entrepreneurialism right behind it. Here comes investment dollars. So keep an eye on Miami in the future. I am curious, though, based on what you said, what that transition was like when you had to go to your mom's house. It sounds like your parents worked together really well to raise you and your siblings, maybe not, but how vastly different was it?
Yeah.
What was the experience at your mom's versus at the hotel?
All right. Yeah. So, my mom, Jewish mom, works hard to support her kids in terms of like emotional support, more food than you could imagine, being a warm, nurturing person. And my dad, vastly opposite, he pull yourself up by the bootstraps, keep your emotions in many times close to the cuff. Don't let people show, if you feel weak or damaged, don't necessarily show that, put forward a strong face, keep your wits about you. And so, I would say it's the traditional male versus female energies. My mom's place was just, it was a traditional house. And so it was calm and relaxing. And you had a room where you could close the door and feel like you escaped the world. Being at my dad's in the hotel, it's like there was always something going on. There was always some kind of drama, especially Miami Beach in the 1980s. I mean, there was always, and we were in a hotel. And so, the drama didn't always necessarily include us, but there was always stuff going on, and Miami was rough and tumble. So, there'd be situations where people would have issues. And, so growing up, I would say in some ways, just seeing the underside of life, where we'd see hookers and drug deals and drug dealers and, people having domestic violence. And, Miami had that wet foot, dry foot thing. So there'd be Cuban refugees who'd wash up on the beach, and we'd see them running by the hotel.
Is there a story that sticks out in your mind? One story you could point to? Is there a favorite story?
One story would be where there was a refugee. We didn't know who or what the story was. All we knew is we're sitting in the lobby. And, back then it was a different vibe. And so you just like hang out. And so there'd always be people just hanging out, and it was a lot lower key. And someone comes running in to the hotel and then darts up like stairs. And we're sitting there like, who is this? What is this? And we didn't know if it was a vagrant, a criminal, a mugger. And so, we had a Doberman, who was our dog, and my dad, he kept a gun. And so, like I go run and grab the dog. My brother grabs like a baseball bat. My dad grabs the gun, and we chase up, and, the guy's like hiding on the third floor in like a back corner or hallway or something. And we sit there and hold the guy trying to figure out what's going on. And then eventually, I don't know who it was, like either Miami Beach police or some kind of immigration enforcement, they came and took possession of him. But, it was just like, who is this? What's happening? And so that's a story that stands out. But there's lots of stories. There's just so many stories, and both really good and really bad. And one of the endearing stories would be, for years, there'd be Jewish families who would come down for snowbirds, is what they were called. They'd be there for 3-6 months at a time, just staying in the hotel because the hotel had efficiencies. Mm-hmm. And, it was just like at some point it would be like a hotel full of grandmas and grandpas. And so that's one of my favorite stories. Like my early childhood was just surrounded by such love. And it was really nice. My parents would entertain them. This is before they split up. They'd entertain. So it would be a whole season. It would be like bingo games and just everything. And it catered meals, and it was just so charming. So I feel like I lived a lifetime, Chris, before I ever even like graduated high school. I had been through such a diverse set of circumstances.
I almost envy you, just to have that wisdom from such a vast array and variety of people from different backgrounds and experiences. One of these, and feel free to set me straight on this if you'd like, and put me in my place on this. I have met a lot of Cuban friends that live in Miami, and then Cuban friends that might have had some time in Miami, but were out of there before they could remember what it was like to live there. And the Cuban friends that grew up in Miami all hate Fidel Castro. And the ones that didn't seem to sympathize with Fidel Castro. So it's like, I never understood that. All I could kind of come up with is that the effect of the media is really strong, and the way universities work is strong, where if you have a university that's sort of pro-Castro, you'll sympathize with that. And if you grew up in Miami and you got there on a boat, like you mentioned, you probably were running for a very, very good reason. Yeah.
I haven't met that many folks in the U.S. who are pro-Castro. You alluded, Chris, to like influence and, culture. And so Miami, So imagine that you have a country and everybody who's controlling that country, all the people who have power, who have wealth, in a very short amount of time, they leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the people who left ended up in Miami. And so these are people who lost their home, their sense of security in the world, their wealth, and had to start over. And so they really hate or really dislike that regime, because they felt that what they had won, what they had owned, their control of the world, their identity, was taken away from them. And time has not made those wounds, for the people still in Miami, I don't think it's made those wounds subside. I think it really has made those wounds grow deeper, and it's become part of a cultural narrative.
Yeah.
And a lot of them still hope, they hold on to the hope that they're somehow going to be compensated for what they lost. And so if you go to Tallahassee today, Chris, you can hear that narrative happening in the halls of government. And I haven't been in that setting here in DC, but I would bet you that if we ever normalize the relationship with Cuba, I think that's one of the things that might be holding up that normalization, is there's people of political influence who lost money and they want to be compensated.
Yeah, the reparations we don't hear about.
Yeah.
Or the reparations battle we don't hear about.
Yeah. And it's cultural, like what do we sit at our table together and talk about, right? And if someone's Cuban in Miami, they have their cafe con leche, they have their pastelito, they have their cigar, they play dominoes. This is the stereotypical Cuban American experience that I would see. And not everyone's like that, but this would be that perceived snapshot of that Cuban American experience. And they sit there talking about that Fidel regime, what they had, what they lost, what they hope to get together again, and these things. And so I think that's part of it. And I would say people not in Miami don't have that same Cuban experience. I have no Cuban blood in me, but growing up in Miami culturally, I would say that I do relate to that Cuban American experience, the story of immigrants, and to be in Miami is to understand and to experience some Cuban culture, because it's just such a dominant, and I would think overall healthy part of Miami.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And you're spot on, because the friend I'm thinking about that grew up in Miami, her family was apparently really wealthy in Cuba before Castro, and they lost everything.
Yeah.
The reason I asked about your upbringing, the difference between your mom and dad, is because I wanted to go into this place where it's like, in the research for you to prepare for this conversation, the question just kept coming back up. In your mind and in your heart, filmmaker first or attorney first? Maybe in your mind, you're an attorney first and a filmmaker second. Maybe in your heart, you're a filmmaker first and an attorney second. If you had to first, which one do you feel you are? And then second, if you had to attribute you growing up and following the path of being an attorney, does that come from your experience with your dad? Or do you attribute that more to the calmness of your mom? And the filmmaking creative side, who would you attribute that to? Maybe both are the same person.
So the easy answer is I'm a filmmaker, right? In my heart, I'm a filmmaker. And in my vocation, so I was out in the real world for 10 years before I ever went back to law school. And I was a filmmaker. I owned a video production company. And so I was doing all these things. And then I decided that I was done with the 18-hour days, right? I was like, I'm done with this. I don't see this being sustainable. I don't want to move to New York or LA.
Right.
And so I just looked at where I was and I was like, okay, law is the next step. I looked at my entertainment lawyer at the time. She's in LA now, but she was down in Miami, and smart, capable, competent person. And I was like, I like her seat at the table. And going back to it as a kid, I always had a joke that I was gonna be like a pilot, an architect, and a lawyer. That was my joke. I was like, I'm gonna build buildings, I'm gonna represent the deal, and I'm gonna fly myself off for vacation. And so from an early age, I liked the law. And then it was only after being in the real world for a while that I was like, okay, it's either now or never. And so being a filmmaker motivated me to go after that original dream from being a kid of doing a lawyer. And in the real world, it's not an either or. So a lot of times, it's a lot of the same deals. It's just where's my seat at the table. Mm-hmm. But if I always tell people, if I win the lottery, what would I choose to continue doing? And filmmaking and producing, I would continue to do just because I love it and it's in my heart. Being a lawyer, I enjoy it. I enjoy the opportunities it affords me. I enjoy that I'm able to help other people in their creative expression and chasing their dreams. So if I have to work, I've chosen that until I win the lottery, if I have to work and if my career is defined with a label, my career will be defined by the label of attorney. But who I am in my heart, I'm a creative in my heart. And one of my main sources of creativity is capturing images, capturing voice, capturing sound, and bringing them together in a way that promotes something. And whether it's fantasy or whether it's inspiration or whether it's a call for action to make the world a better place, in my heart, I would view myself as a filmmaker.
Thank you for that. That's interesting because I assume that the transition was attorney to filmmaker, but really your transition was filmmaker to attorney. And I think that's just because in the past, it's like, well, I've been an attorney, I've been representing creatives, and then I got this opportunity, realized I have some stories to tell too, so let me be a filmmaker. But for you, it's the other way around. That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Thanks. I was sitting there was a cable network, and I was sitting in a pitch meeting with them where I had hustled for months to create this opportunity. Yeah. And so I bring in my entertainment lawyer, and we're having the meeting, and it goes pretty well. And I pitch them my project, and they give me all these steps that I need to do in order to advance the project along. And then, she's sitting there and she is helping me. But then when this is done, she has the relationship, the benefit of that relationship that I worked to create. She now has access to it. Yeah. And Chris, she's not tied to like one deal like I was.
Yeah.
She's able now to use that relationship and present other deals if that opportunity arises. And I know that she did get to present a few other deals. And so I looked at that and I examined what seat at the table do I want?
Right.
And,
yeah.
In being a lawyer, it's like I'm a big advocate for my clients, but I'm also able to have, like her, I'm able to have these relationships. And so let's say that I bring in a client and we make that deal happen, and there's a friendly, good opportunity that's able to happen again and again. I liked that seat at the table, and it's one that could help me with my own individual projects, and it's one that can help me have a greater impact for my clients. Because I think a lot of being a lawyer is being able to have relationships. So it's not just like, okay, can I read this contract? But it's like, okay, can I read this contract? And then if we need to bring someone else in, who do I know? And I think being an attorney lets somebody in a healthy way build, groom, maintain relationships.
Yeah, it's very similar to being in film because film is basically your reputation and relationships that you have. Um, I would say the way you describe what you do in law is very, very similar to that for sure. I want to give this audience a couple of titles here, films you've worked on, directed, produced. So In Hot Water, Dead Run, Danny Morgan's Authentic Eats, ADC Original, Odyssey, Bethesda, Action Inc., um, Cherry Blossom Whisperer, to name a few. So a lot of these are short films, but among your own credits and things you've directed or produced, which one of those films that I just named did you learn the most from?
So I would probably say In Hot Water was the one that I learned the most from. And yeah, I would say In Hot Water. And that was down in Miami. And, we had some talent, and, the talent actually used that to go out to LA and build bigger careers.
Oh, nice.
And so I was the producer, I was the director, I was the writer. I was able to call in all these people who I had helped do stuff. And this was before I was a lawyer, before I even decided to go to law school. And it was just such a fun experience because I had people with me who I knew, I liked, I trusted. So I felt like everyone had my back. And I was able to really create the expression that I had in my mind. And it really showed up on the screen. And and so I enjoyed it. And it was basically a very campy, over the top tale about revenge. Some domineering guy tries to control some woman, and then he wrongs her, and then they get revenge on the guy.
A tale as old as time.
Yeah. and so it's just really campy, and it was really fun on set. And it was a healthy film to work on, exhausting, but really healthy. And so I would say that is probably my favorite. And then a lot of these other ones you mentioned. So yeah, a lot of these, now I wear the role where I don't necessarily want to be the producer, director, editor, all this stuff.
It's a lot to carry all those pills.
Yeah. So a lot of times now, Chris, what I do is I produce in batches, and I will have crews underneath me. And the goal is to empower them and to facilitate them developing creative expression. And I really, in a lot of cases, become the executive producer, where I help put the teams together. If there's problems or things stall out in the teams, I help push them through it. And so before COVID, we would produce anywhere between 10 and 20 movies, short films a year. And we'd often do it in batches, either one or two big batches at a time. And the framework I came up with was called Make a Movie in a Month.
I saw that on the Wheaton Film Festival site. Explain Make a Movie in a Month to the audience.
Certainly. So Make a Movie in a Month is where we bring together people. So we have events where we put it out there and we explain what's going on. And then we will have, almost like it's a consolidated studio system, we'll have people pitch ideas, and the folks in the audience vote on these ideas, not with a show of hands, but with actually signing up to work on the ideas that have been pitched at the meeting. And then we will have 30 days for the folks to actually make that movie. And a lot of times it'll be on a theme. And so I believe that filmmaking is a power for healthy development and healthy expression. And so we're not doing movies about things like crime or revenge. We're doing it about family or art or striving or building your dream or healthy community expression or diversity, things where we can look at elements and stories in our community and something that's healthy that you take away, either saying, oh, I really like that about our community, or I don't like that, but this film creates a conversation point where we can improve upon.
Right.
And so that really is the goal with the Make a Movie in a Month. Is it's not just telling stories to tell stories, it's telling stories about our community that uplift our community, highlight what's good, and highlight the things that we want to have deeper conversations about to fix. And I've been doing it since 2016. I am in the process of transforming it into a digital experience, because with COVID, it's not necessarily as easy, Chris, to have like 100, 150 people in a room.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we create film crews, and I come up with a suggested schedule that the film crews follow. And I work with the team lead, who generally is a producer or director, but not always. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I also bring in a lieutenant, somebody who will be learning from me. And oftentimes it's an internship where someone's getting college credit for doing that. In the past, I've tried to have 2 or 3 interns every year. With COVID, it's a little tougher. And so either I will do all the work if I don't have an intern. If I do have an intern, then I will be teaching them with me as we executive produce 10 or 20 movies. And so it's very meta, where like I'm doing the work or I'm teaching somebody to do the work that I would be doing, but now I'm like sitting over their shoulder and helping them do it.
That sounds incredibly rewarding. That it really does. And it's right up our alley. When I say our, I mean me and my partner, Nick. We business partner, Nick. And this is exactly what we love to do. And kudos to not being an ivory tower executive producer either. A lot of times the money comes in, that person's just trying to, get a tax break, or they are diversifying in some way, or some diversification plan. And the movies suffer because of that. And the first thing we ever executive produced, we learned a big lesson about just the little things you said earlier, like, you should be present, even though you're not on screen and you're not controlling any cameras off screen or behind, your job is to make sure that you've created an adequate runway for success. You've put all those crew and creatives in the best position to be successful. And that's something you have to learn too. That's a skill set. And one of the first shorts we ever produced, I really failed in that category, and it affected the film. It affected the ending because we didn't have enough time at that location to shoot and get the pickups we needed. So hearing you say that is a big deal. It's awesome. Is there a movie that you can think of that inspired you to start getting into film or to do, In Hot Water? Was there a movie that jumps out to you that says, oh my God, this is what I want to do with my life?
So I would say it's so stereotypical, but, I think Clerks and Pulp Fiction.
Nothing wrong with that.
And Reservoir Dogs. I would say that those made it clear that it could be done without going to Hollywood and going through the machine. Yeah.
Right.
But I grew up a total film geek. And, it's interesting because you talk about, an earlier question was about the difference between my mom and my dad's. My mom, very low tech, right? My dad, always into video and technology. And so we grew up with VCRs. And before that, he had like a reel-to-reel VHS.
Yeah.
Or not even VHS, tape recorder. And so growing up, like all my friends would come to my house because we had all these TVs and VCRs and projection systems. And so I would just be watching movies constantly growing up at my dad's. And so I was one of those guys where I'd just be sitting there for hours with friends. We'd be drinking beers and just spouting movie lines back and forth at each other. And, we're talking like Blues Brothers and Stripes and like all Animal House, like just all these awesome older things. And so I would say if I didn't have something to do, I was often just watching movies as a kid. And I would say that inspired me. And it was just part of it where just the magic, the absolute magic. And I don't know if that's something that today's generation gets in the same way, but, just going and watching that movie or seeing it just felt magical.
Yeah. It feels like today that the problem is paradox of choice. It's the Netflixification of media. And it's unfortunate that we blame Netflix because they're certainly not the only organization that does it, company that does it. They just were the ones that perfected it early and everyone copied. It's almost like McDonald's takes the brunt of the blame for the fast food industry, even though they might not be the worst fast food place to go to. But you get a sense that Netflix is making things and just throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks with the audience and then tracking that through analytics. Whereas it was a little bit easier to decide what we were going to watch, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think coming up, and now it's like it's really difficult to even figure out what to watch, and unless you're, and then there's the shows. So it's like,
Right.
well, I'm gonna watch a movie, maybe I'll binge this, and you're just it's almost like you're overeating.
Yes.
So you're not really like watching the craft. You're like, you're being force fed content.
Yes.
That's goal isn't to entertain you necessarily or even educate you or that's the goal is to get you to not click the off button.
Yes.
So you got to get that next episode in there quick.
Yes. Yes.
I would go ahead.
And I would agree. And it's when I was growing up, you suspended disbelief. You went into a movie theater and you watched.
Yes.
And there was a commitment there, and the amount of distraction wasn't the same. And you weren't able on demand to relive parts of that. And so you walked in and you had this narrative experience, almost like listening to a record from the beginning to the end. And I'm not saying that where we are now is worse, but it is different.
Mm-hmm.
And as a storyteller, it feels different. And when I look at a story as being linear, or whereas I might look at a film project as being linear, it's not always that way now. Now it might be that the success of a film is based on snippets that are then uploaded everywhere in social and linked back. And it's just such a different experience creatively. So,
I wonder, like in 20 years, will it make sense to release an album as an artist with the way that you sort of get paid through your streams per song? Would it be smarter just to release a song every month for a year? So here's your 12-song album. Eventually it becomes a collection, but it was really just 12 individual streams. Once they figure out sort of how to market that the right way, I think that's what we'll see. I don't want to let this audience down. We've got a man of many talents as a guest. And so I want to, just as a focus on the filmmaker and the creative side that might be listening to this and could learn from your expertise, what is the most common intellectual property mistake new or young filmmakers and creatives make? And what is the first step in protecting their creative work?
Okay, great question. So when it comes to an intellectual property mistake, it would be not owning it, right? So intellectual property is just like somebody can own real estate. You can own creative expression or property that is based on intellect. And you don't generally have the ability to own an idea, right?
Right.
For something like copyright, which is for filmmakers, that's a very important thing. Copyright protects the expression of a creative idea that's fixed in a tangible medium. So I tell you this amazing story. If I say it with my words, not protected. If I write it down, if I email it, if I record it on video and then I share that, that expression is now protected. And if you see that expression and you copy it, you don't have the right, so I can enforce against you for intellectual property infringement, copyright infringement. So when we talk about copyright, it's based on authorship. Who's doing the work?
Yeah.
And so if people, Chris, if they don't understand this, then they're possibly ruining their career before it really gets started. And so I'd say the biggest problem I see is folks just not knowing. Just being, I'm going to focus, I'm an artist, I'm going to focus on my art, and I'm just let everything else not happen. Well, that's a recipe for ruining your career and depriving the world of your creativity. Yeah. Because you have to maintain the machine in order for the machine to work. You have to maintain, we live in a capitalist system, right? Mm-hmm. You have to maintain the business side of your creativity in order for your creativity to be able to survive. And I'm sorry, but you have to pay rent, you have to get health insurance, you have to do all these things, or else you can't focus on being a creative. And that means that folks need to get educated on intellectual property and what kind of agreements are there for intellectual property, right? And having the hard conversations when you're going to work on something, being like, no, I'm not just going to work on it. I'm going to have a conversation about what do I want and what am I giving? What are the other people involved in the project? What do they want? What are they giving, right? And so a big question would be, who owns the intellectual property?
Yeah.
And what is the remuneration for the person who doesn't own it? And what is the license that the person who doesn't own it, what license are they getting? So I, Brian, am a cameraman. I'm working on something and I'm not getting paid.
Right.
But I will get credit. I will get fed, and I will have license to use clips from this project so that I can put that in my reel so that I can get bigger and better jobs. And maybe when I say I'm not getting paid, maybe I'm not getting paid cash, but maybe I'm getting a deferred payment. So if this project ever does get to a certain level, then I'm able to participate in it. So that's an example. On the other hand, let's say I, Brian, am a producer and I just bring in my friends and they work on this project with me, and then we go our separate ways. And Chris, let's say it happens, someone's like, we want to distribute this project, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they're going to have a lawyer who's going to say, let me see all your release agreements. Let me see all your work for hire agreements, your independent contractor agreements. And if the filmmaker or producer doesn't have those agreements, they don't own the copyright to the project that they've worked so hard on. And so it's like one of the things that my clients say that they really like about working with me is that I know what it is to be a filmmaker. I know the seat that they're sitting in, but I'm also able to say in their language, hey, before we can move forward with this, you need to take care of these initial steps so that we can move forward. And when someone doesn't do those, we have to actually go back and we have to track down the talent and the crew and everybody and get the paperwork that should have happened at the front end.
And that can be scary because someone in that group might know that they have a little leverage at that very moment. and decide to use it. Is there any difference internationally around IP? In that scenario you gave, would they be okay distributing outside the US, or, for example?
Well, that's like a law school exam right there. So intellectual property, the most important.
Sorry.
the three most important pieces are patent,
Mm-hmm.
which protects a technology or or a process, and that would be utility patent. There's other kinds of patent, but a technology or process would be a utility patent. A trademark would be something that identifies the source of goods or services in the marketplace. And then copyright, as I said, protects creative expression, a fixed medium. And so there's different paradigms that control intellectual property internationally and globally. For example, trademark is protected by nation. Mm-hmm. And so just because I have a trademark in the US doesn't let me enforce that trademark in China, right? So I have to actually register the trademark in China. When it comes to copyright, it is possible to use copyright in the US to enforce copyright in other countries. But you use the word possible. So anything's possible, right? So, but a lot of distribution and monetization flows through the US. And so if somebody wants to send cease and desist letters and somebody wants to attack distribution, then they might be able to limit, for example, distribution in China, Japan, India, and other Africa. They might be able to use concerns about intellectual property here in the US as reason to do it overseas. And those overseas distributors, if they are doing deals based in the US and they're concerned about somebody going after them for their US presence, if they have US bank accounts, if they're doing stuff that's grounded in the US, they might just be like, I don't know, I'm not going to risk it. I would say the larger, more established, more respectable businesses, they want to see everything is delivered, right? They don't want to invest. It's so difficult, as you know, standing out in the marketplace. And there's no shortage of films out there in the world that can be distributed. Every day, there's more and more and more things that are coming out there. So if one of my clients is a film distribution company, and we won't distribute projects if they don't have everything lined up.
Has to be clean.
Yeah, and I would hope that overseas, that the major players overseas do the same. Somebody could do smaller things, and somebody could fib and play ignorance, and so it's possible, but it's not how you build a career, right? It's not. You don't want to use your calling card to the world, your first film, showing you, being a scoundrel. And I have a friend here a friendly acquaintance here in DC who made an amazing film, and it never got. It's well known, but it never got major distribution because he never was able to get the releases or the licenses. And so it just makes its way around, but it hasn't earned him the money or the acclaim that he would have had if he would have had everything lined up.
It's not Chameleon Street, is it?
It's not.
Okay, I was gonna say that's the best movie that never was that I can think of. There was a company that just did a 4K. They're doing a 4K festival run with it, and it's
cool.
It's amazing. So if you can go watch Chameleon Street, you'll be like, how did this guy not make 1,000 more things? It's the singular thing he wrote made. I think he might have had a spot in one other film in the 90s. And you're like, how did this happen? He's absolutely brilliant. Future of Film Conference. What is it? And what are its goals?
Yeah. And so Future of Film.
Annual Future of Film Conference.
Yeah. And so I, Brian, am not part of that production team for that event. But there's a group, Creative Edge Collaborative in PG County.
Yeah, I got that as well. Yeah.
Yep. And so, so Pierre Walcott and his team over there, and they're about bringing voices that have historically been silenced from media and film. Okay. They're about giving those communities more representation and a bigger voice. And so a lot of it really is focused on the African-American community, people of color. And so Pierre and his team do a great job. And so I've been fortunate enough where I was able to create some relationships for them as an organization to bring more opportunities and education to PG County. And an amazing event that team produces is the Future of Film. And this is really about what will film look like. And a lot of it is not just in the technology and the law and the business, but when film really does have that diversity of inclusion, right? When we're not just looking at it from one vantage point, but it really has diversity woven in to it. And it's a fascinating conversation to have.
It's one of the, to me, it's one of the most exciting things about the potential future of film is that we're going to see content in a way we've never seen it before in the history of film. Because there are so many organizations like Creative Collaborative that, and people like yourself that are going to allow those voices, and not just allow them, but like give them resources, provide resources and runway to put those stories out there, stories we've never heard about before. And you might enjoy this because I really just don't know why we were ever in this spot. I mean, obviously I know, but it's like, it just never made logical sense to me why we're in the spot we are in, where we need these type of programs. But you being from Florida, being a big football fan, and I saw Dan Lebertard report that Stephen Ross, who owns the Miami Dolphins, was going to hire Mike Tomlin, who's the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but quote unquote said he was too hip hop for the organization. And so it's that kind of coded language at the very tops of organizations that really pushes, like you said, those diverse voices out, and it's across industries. So I just thought it was fascinating. I thought it would just like fits right into the pocket of Brian Frankel as well, you being from Florida. I want to ask you a bunch of rapid speed round questions.
Count me in.
If you good with that. Okay. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now as a filmmaker?
COVID, in terms of wanting to keep people safe. So adapting to doing decentralized filmmaking. And I would also say finding people. Mm-hmm. I've noticed it, we're like with interns, I've noticed in the past, there was just so many people who wanted to intern. And I'd say like serious interns now, it's fewer, it's harder. I feel it's harder to find people. I think so I just think finding good people.
Yeah. I wonder if the great worker revolution, as they call it, is going to affect film at all. It feels like film and creative work is the thing that these people are leaving their corporate jobs to go do.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting if it affected film where it's like, yeah, we can't find anybody to hire either. Like I think people just want to, lay on the couch. When you were making all the films that I mentioned earlier in the conversation, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome as a filmmaker, and how did you overcome it?
So I would say time, and there's only so many hours in the day, and there's stuff you want to get done. And I would say dependency on people, right? Because as I don't want to be the one-man band, I become increasingly dependent on the people I work with.
Right.
And so I think the way that I've overcome it, it's just experience, and it's creating what my team has, which is called the framework. And so every person who works with me is given a copy of the framework, and their job is to follow it and to add to it and to streamline it and to edit it. And so we have a living document that breaks things down into step-by-steps, into procedures, into standard operating procedures, lists. And so
I'd love to see that. And maybe we can talk about finding a way to share that through our website with creatives, or a sample of it. Is it similar to like a template, not exactly yours? Is it similar to like a pre-pro doc?
Yeah. And it's not just pre-production. So in the context of doing Make a Movie in a Month, which is where we basically executive produce projects. Yeah. It's what do we do from the moment the lights go on until the moment we're sending out thank you notes.
So it's literally a run of show.
Yes. And for the Wheaton Film Festival, it's that and more. And then, we also create a whole system of digital files. And so it would be like, okay, this is what you're doing. And then somebody's going to this file, and inside there's this template. And so it is systematizing. And I had one intern where, it was just talk about the win-win. It was just such a good situation where she needed to stay involved for immigration purposes. And so she ended up being with me for 1.5 years, and just a wonderful, wonderful, capable person. And she was the first one who was like, okay, let's systematize everything that we do. And it changed my work as a producer. It changed my work as a lawyer. It just changed my work, because now I really am focused on process. And I know, Chris, that you guys get it, because just to give you a shout out, in leading up to our conversation today, like, you were really good about sending me the information. Like, I could see you have this process in place where I'm not having to proactively ask you 10 questions. You're giving me information. You're getting things ready. You're priming the pump, and you're creating the framework so that we can jump in and we can have a good back and forth. And so I would say, how do you get the most out of your day? How do you manage people? How do you reduce miscommunication? How do you provide detailed expectations, standard operating procedures, written documents, and communication? That's it.
Perfect. And thank you for the kind words. We figured out how to do these processes through a variety of heart-wrenching and soul-crushing failures. Yeah. What are the 2 best pieces of advice you've been given in your career, and who did they come from?
So I would say one of them is from my mom, and I don't even know where she got it from. So my mom worked with a retired military guy named Herman Soren, who ran a group called Corporate Dynamics. Herman's passed, but his job was to go into companies and train them so that they would perform better.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, she still shares the lessons that she's learned from her life and with Herman, and his group. And so this may come from Herman. I'm not sure, but she always says to me, and she still says it. She says, you either have reasons or results, right? It's really easy to sit on the couch and watch another episode on Netflix, drink an apple cider, eat some chips and say, oh man, I really could have done this, but that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a great reason, but it doesn't get the result. And so I would say that has stuck with me where, all right, am I going after what I want, or am I just coming up with a story so I can pacify myself and not go after it?
I really love that. That's really boiled down and crystallized. What's another one?
So I would say there's two others. This wasn't given to me directly because I don't have a relationship with him, but I listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast sometimes.
Love Tim Ferriss.
And I really found his 4-Hour Workweek book, if you take it with a grain of salt, I really found it to be impactful. I'd never had the expectation of, reading it and being able to work 4 hours, but he talks about the Pareto principle, where you have a minority of actions that are going to produce the majority of results. And so it's the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the activities are going to produce 80% of the rewards. And so that would really be something that I reflect on, like, okay, am I spinning my wheels? Chris, am I spinning my wheels, right? Am I sitting here doing something just to do something? But at the end of the day, I'm not learning. I'm not increasing my footprint in the world. I'm not increasing my impact, right? It's not creating new opportunities. It's not paying my bills. Like, what is it doing? And so that Pareto principle, like, focus on what is creating the results. Like, for me, that's impactful. And I'll give you a bonus.
Oh, please. Yeah.
One of my friends from undergrad, from college, not a sensitive person, not a not a warm, endearing person necessarily, pretty blunt. And something that he gave me as feedback, which was a little painful, was, it was like, why not? Right.
Yeah.
Or why? And so I'd make some statement about, well, I'm doing this and I can't do that. And he'd be like, you're full of bullshit. Why not? Right? And I don't want to hear, and very rarely will somebody like, I'm not going to put up with that, but this is a friend. And when, someone that I know, like, and trust in the context of a greater relationship is calling me out, they have the relationship with me where they can do that. And it changed the course of my life, because I was sitting on a rooftop of a skyscraper, and we're drinking and we're talking about what's next, and we're talking about all these things. And I talked about where I was and other projects that I want to work on and how I couldn't because of this, that, the other. And I guess it goes to the reasons or results. I guess it touches on that. And in just a few short words and some friendly banter, I had a light bulb moment that went off where it's like, okay, why not?
And right? What's the friend's name?
Oh, we'll just call him Mike.
Mike.
Yeah.
But we'll call him pseudonym Mike. I like pseudonym Mike wherever you are out there. And it is something everybody can use. Yeah. All three of those, to me, touch on a crisis of some sort that every person is going through. I love the 80-20 rule. I find it like, to me, it's almost like mathematical magic, because wherever you go in the world, regardless of industry, regardless of action, Pareto's law persists. If you go into some organization, you're going to find out that 20% of the employees are bringing you 80% of the results. And it's almost uncanny. It's not 60-40. It's not 70-30. It really is 80-20. And you get on a film set and you find out that all the creative juice and the energy, it's really being driven by that core group that came up with the idea, that basically the entrepreneurs that got the money together and got the locations, and then everybody else is supporting that vision. So thank you for that. Staying on the subject of advice, if you had to give filmmakers, and I know you do this through the film festival and other means, if you had to give filmmakers one piece of advice, what would it be? It can be legal advice or creative advice, or both, whichever you prefer.
If I was going to give them one piece of advice, I would say focus and come up with a plan, right? So, and I think that is one piece, part of focusing is coming up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So often creatives are like, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a artist, I'm a musician,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer, and I'm a chef, and I'm a car mechanic. It's like, that's wonderful, that's great, but start off on pick one and focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be able to put yourself in positions where you're doing an elevator pitch and, you're wearing one hat. And, as a filmmaker, as a creative becomes more successful, then they can afford to wear 20 hats, right? But starting off, each individual thing, Chris, on its own is tough.
Yeah.
Every one of these things is tough. And so just focusing on one. And then when you have that focus, when you say, okay, what's going to open the doors that I want? Like, what is going to build me in who I want to be? And then saying, okay, what is the plan? And I love the story of Jim Carrey, where, he wrote himself a check for like $1 million. He went to the Hollywood Strip, and he wrote himself a check for $1 million. And he said, by this date, I'm going to be able to cash that.
Mm-hmm.
And he envisioned what that career would look like. And he worked hard for it. He planned it, and he was successful. And so I think that is the advice I give. I think everything else is secondary. If you want to be a filmmaker, then see yourself as a filmmaker and plan for you to be a filmmaker, and not a filmmaker starting off with 20 other acronyms or 20 other hats that you're wearing all simultaneously.
Yeah, I think a lot of times that's about ego and self-fulfillment to a fault. So focus on that one thing and get it done.
Yeah, and also ADHD and trying to have your cake and eat it too, and fear of commitment, and we could have a whole Dr. Phil show.
We could dive into that. Maybe we'll do a round 2 and dive into that, Brian. Me and you, we'll get deep into that. On that same note, though, what are the biggest creative and business mistakes you're seeing newcomers make today?
All right. And so I would say, so first off, like we spoke about, people doing too many things at once,
Mm-hmm.
Spreading out their energy, minimizing their ability to do elevator pitches, not being able to have a clear focus that their community can help them. If you tell your community, I'm a filmmaker, then you're putting those feelers out. If you're giving them 20 things, there's no hook for them to remember who you are and what you're doing.
They don't know how to help you. Yeah.
Right. Another thing that I see people doing are shortcuts. They think there's a shortcut way to get success.
Mm-hmm.
And them not doing the groundwork, right? And so a filmmaker who doesn't understand film can't really be a filmmaker.
Right.
They need to understand what it is to actually be making a motion picture. And so when I say film, I'm using film and digital film in the same context. But they need to understand what is this medium that they're working on. What's some of the important history of it? What's the technology behind it? And somebody just putting on the hat and saying I'm a filmmaker, I don't think they have the ability to make the same impact if they rush too soon to make that declaration. And so I think doing the groundwork, not trying to take too many shortcuts, you only get so many shots at success. And I think somebody needs to prepare themselves so that they have a good foundation for when they do get the attention and they are offered the opportunity where they can actually deliver on it.
And the world knows it when they see it. There's a past guest, and she's the artistic director at Indie Memphis. Her name's Miriam Bell. And when you talk to her, it's like, oh, that's what a film expert sounds like. I thought I was. No, that's someone who's put in the 10,000 hours. Like, they know obscure things.
Right.
And, it's not like a contest of intellect or anything like that. You can spot that too, where somebody's just sort of, bragging about what they know. But when you can be conversational with it, you can tell it's just natural. It's like, oh, okay, wow, okay, this is who they are. They've dedicated their life to this. That's
yes.
So
and
good point, Brian.
I totally agree with this, because at the end of the day, it's like, this is our life, right? These are our lives. And we only have so many hours, so many days, so many opportunities. And if I am investing time in a film, who do I want to be with me? And I want the people with me to have the ability to support the overall mission, which is get the film done, right? Yeah. We're talking about time, opportunity cost, money, resources, and the ability to impact, educate, entertain. And that's one of the things that's amazing about film. The audience will choose, and they'll tell you whether they like it or not. And all the ingredients that you have don't necessarily dictate the total success. It's how you combine those ingredients and how it's perceived by the audience. And so, pardon my French, but I don't want someone bullshitting, right? Yep. I want somebody with me who knows what they're doing, or they're honest enough to say, I don't know.
Yeah, and teach me, and I'll be a quick study because I'm all in, or something like that. Yeah.
The biggest thing that I resent is if somebody tells me they know something, they bullshit me, and then it turns out that they were really full of smoke, because they've wasted my time. They've taken an opportunity from somebody who should be in their position instead of them, and they've ruined the trust. And so, going back to that core list, it's of what mistakes do I see people doing? They're doing too many things at once. They're trying to take shortcuts. They're not doing the groundwork. They're sometimes too focused on others, and they're saying, oh, that person looks successful. That person looks happy. That person looks like what they have is good. Whether or not that's even true, judging oneself by what they perceive others to have, I see that being a mistake. Pressing snooze on tough decisions and tough conversations, I see that as being a mistake, right?
Yeah, that's huge.
Have those tough conversations at the front end before there's money, before there's as much ego, before there's as much emotion. Do it at the very front end, or really close to the front end, rather than down the line when there's more zeros involved, when there's more possibility for miscommunication. Do it early. do it early, do it early. And if the project needs to have the plug pulled, well, you'll know early on rather than wasting a month, a year, a decade.
I'm going to steal that from you. I love that phraseology, pressing snooze. That is literally what people do on tough decisions and conversations. Like, we'll get to that later. And now to these street tacos that we can enjoy together. I'm not going to have this conversation with you. Brian, that's amazing. And
I got two more.
You're amazing, by the way. Thank you for these pointers. Oh, give me the two more. We'll take them.
So one is people having too narrow of a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm writing these things down if you haven't noticed.
All right. They're not, they're looking at, okay, I just want to get this film done, right? I just want to make this great film. Well, stop. You making the great film is meaningless. Sorry to be blunt.
Yeah.
But one of my earliest film professors called it mental masturbation, right? Just the act of being creative isn't enough. It's not enough.
Yeah.
Getting people to see your creativity, having your creativity mean something. Like, what is the bigger picture that the context that your creativity sits in? And so looking beyond just the process of the lights turn on, you make a movie, you edit it, and you're done. Like, what's leading up to it and what's happening afterward and what's happening after this project. So having a bigger timeline, thinking in the context of beyond this specific creative project, taking the blinders off for a second and looking bigger picture. Then once you have that, putting the blinders back on and getting in the moment and focusing here, but having a greater sense of what's your overall plan. And then finally, and I've alluded to it, but I'm going to say it bluntly, right? This concept that you're going to create work and you're going to get discovered, right? My work is going to be of such wonderful quality that the marketplace will find me. And I'm so sorry. I wish that was where we are in 2022, but it's just not the truth. Nobody's going to, quote, get discovered, right? Mm-hmm. The overnight sensation is a lot of times somebody who's worked 10 years to become an overnight sensation.
Right.
Or it's somebody who has really amazing talent by the gift of God and practice in heavens. They have amazing talent. And statistically, they were able to post it and get heard by just the right person and appeal to write this, and it works through and they blow up. But that is really, really, for every Justin Bieber who gets discovered because someone posts his video online, and he doesn't necessarily do the years and years of soul searching and sacrifice that so many musicians do. For every one of him, there's 10,000 others. Mm-hmm. And so, And so I would say that people are not just going to get discovered by the virtue of their work. It's the virtue of their work combined with a plan, combined with building an audience, like organically building a system, building a platform where you're developing your voice in the world. Right. And there's a marketing guy, I think, like Seth Godin.
Seth Godin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He talks about it.
Guy.
Yeah. And he talks about having a tribe, right? So we don't need 10,000 people. I think he talks about like 1,000 core people. Like if you have 1,000
people, Kevin Kelly concept, 1,000 true fans. Yep.
Yeah. If you have 1,000 people, then that's what you need. And that's enough to amplify your voice. So if you're a great singer and you have 1,000 people who believe in you, well, there's that old commercial, they tell two friends and so on and so on and so on. And that's the reality we live. And so if you focus on just getting the core group of people who listen to you, well, my hope and intent for everybody is that that's enough to start getting your message out there.
Yeah. The analogy I mention from time to time is that over 50% of all businesses that fail before they get their first customer. I don't think a lot of people realize that and how difficult it is just to get one person to think you're remarkable enough to let loose of some of their dollars.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough thing. And I'm reminded of the guy who did, I'm forgetting his name now, that did Squid Game on Netflix. Like, where does this guy come from? Well, he's been doing movies for 10 years. You just didn't know it. Because like you said, he's been working his butt off and then he gets his big break. They passed on that thing 100 times. They finally made it, and it became the biggest thing in Netflix history, I believe, or close to it. So, Brian, this has been an awesome conversation. I can't thank you enough. Can you tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, on social media, or where they can maybe even see some of your work?
Yep. So best way to find me would be brianfrankel.com. That's my law firm. That's
Frankel is Frankel.
Yep. BrianFrankel.com. And so, if you ever want to reach out to me, there's some form at the bottom where you can contact me. Another way to see what's going on is WheatonFilmFestival.com. WheatonFilmFestival, Wheaton Film Festival.com.
Will it be going on in November again in 22?
Yeah, it is. And we actually already opened up, we haven't made announcements for it, but we already opened up submissions. The earliest we've ever done it, I figured, so we just did a soft opening. We'll start announcing it later in the year. And then another way to reach me is on Facebook. There's a group called DC Filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And, it's mainly for people here in the DMV, but we do have members from all over the world in DC Filmmakers. And then on Twitter, I'm at Brian Films. So that's my Twitter handle, BrianFilms. And so I think between all those things, you can reach me. And yeah, it's been wonderful speaking with you. And I really just want everyone to know that your ability to make a difference in this world, your ability to be a creative professional, to be a filmmaker, there's only one place that you need to rely on in order to do that. And that's you, right? Like, you become a filmmaker the moment that you say, I'm a filmmaker. And so just make the commitment. And that's a big part of my professional career, is just delivering that message. It's like the moment you're willing to get off your couch, right? Turn off the TV, put down the bag of chips and say, I'm going to start doing this. That's when you do it. And it doesn't even need to be filmmaking. It could be anything, right? It could be podcasting. It could be saying I'm going to become a business person, anything. You just have to commit to it. And then you got it.
Hear, 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 hear. And Brian, we'll end on this only because I know that you're a lover of riddles. I wanted to see if you'd play along. I want to read you a riddle and see if you can get it.
All right.
Okay, here we go. I have no wallet, but I pay my way. I travel the world, but in the corner I stay. What am I?
A postage stamp.
Look at you. Amazing. That is correct. That is correct, my friend.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Well done. Well done. And whenever I'm in the DC area, which I am quite a bit because Nick is in DC area. He lives in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So when I come up there, hang out with him, workshop with him, maybe we can get together right there. And I think it's right around the corner.
Yeah.
From Gaithersburg, where you stay. We can get some coffee, get some lunch, and chat it up and have a great little film chat. What do you think?
Sounds great. I'll count me in 100%.
All right. I'm there. Take care of yourself. This has been a blast, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris. Great speaking with you.
Likewise. Be good, man.
All right.
Bye. You've been listening to the Make It podcast. To find out more information about this week's topics, including links to relevant blog posts, projects, and indie creatives, please visit our website at www.bonsai.film. If you haven't already, you can join our podcast community on Apple Podcasts or the podcast app of your choice by searching for Make It Bonsai Creative, and the show will pop right up. You now have the opportunity to support the production of this podcast. If you love Make It and are a true fan of what we're trying to accomplish in the indie film community, please visit www.bonsai.film and click Contribute. Contributions start at only $5 monthly. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at _Bonsai Creative and on Facebook by searching for Bonsai Creative. You can provide feedback to us via email at contact@bonsai.film, and you can follow me, Chris, on Twitter at Flaming Your Heart. That's FLAMEINURHEART. And of course, if you're looking to take a big step towards your filmmaking success, go to www.bonsai.film and click on Services to explore a variety of offerings from keynotes and panels to pitch readiness assessments and so much more. You have everything to gain. Until next time, be better, be creative, be engaged, and thank you for listening.